for the actual mounting. Just to give you some ideas, this is some of the ones, and this is how it should look. You can see the joints here, there. You can see the epoxy to keep the jaw solid. Okay, so this is just various size uluas. Let's try and zoom in, you can get a better. You notice the smaller ones have the real sharp teeth compared to the older, larger ones. The teeth are a little bit more dull and they're actually missing a lot of their teeth, like their teeth are falling out, but it actually regrows. Okay, so that's what your final product should look like. Now I'm going to move this on the side and we're going to go through how to get it to look like that. And it's not hard, but there's some tricks to help you. Okay, so this is our, I think it was a 14-pound omilu. This is what I boiled in the pot in the first video. So as you can see, the 4 pieces, top and the bottom, and that's what you should have. Okay? What I got here is, there's a number of ways you can do it, but I found this is the easiest way to do it. Is you're gonna need your jaw. I got this at an art store. It's just clay. It never dries until you bake it, but it's basically synthetic clay, and this really helps for setting this thing up. Paper plate, chopsticks, or plastic fork or spoon for applying the epoxy. And I just have a quick epoxy, 5-minute, and you want to just make sure that it's an epoxy that says clear. So if you look at the packaging here, you want it to say, it's ripped off, but it'll say crystal clear. You want to make sure that you got a clear one, and some of them come out white or black, or you don't want to put that on your jaw. Okay, so we're going to take our clay, just rip off a bunch, kind of press it on the plate, get a bunch out of there. Basically, you want to just put a little bit of a foundation. And I'll show you what the clay is for in a minute. Kind of just press it all together. Use some paper towels, wipe your hands off. I'll put the clay on the side for now. Okay, what the clay is for is to actually set up your jaw. So the first part of this is you have to do the top or bottom, but you have to basically put them together. So you got to epoxy them together. Once you do one side, then you're going to do the other side. You're going to put it together, and then from there, then you're actually going to do the top and bottom at the corners before you have your hole. Okay, so the clay, we're going to stick the jaw in the clay, and it helps hold it up. Yeah, you can see how it's held, it's suspended. Otherwise, to do this, it's a pain in the butt. But the clay will actually hold it in place for you to epoxy. You can poke it in there, and it actually holds it. And then you can also put stuff, you can put clay behind it if you need to, but I wouldn't recommend that. If you want to put a little bit of clay at the corner for additional support, go ahead and do that. Okay, so set it up how you want it. You know, it should look like that. That's our top. Okay, you're gonna take your epoxy. You can do it on that plate or a separate plate. Oh, you gotta pop the cap off. Put a little bit of epoxy in there. You want to make sure you get an equal amount. You want to make sure it sets good. It's probably way more than we need. cap it off so it doesn't dry. Put that somewhere and just mix it real good. This is 5-minute epoxy. You're supposed to mix it for about a minute or two, mix it thoroughly, and I think after about 4 to 6 minutes it starts setting up. So after you mix this thing for about a minute, you have a few minutes to really get this thing to set up. What I like to do is I like to wait a little bit, maybe 2 minutes or so, 2.5 minutes, when this stuff tends to get a little thicker, so I can start applying it to my jaw. That way it doesn't drip and goop as much. Because if you put it on when it's too wet, it's going to be real drippy. You want it when it's a little bit on the thicker side. The other alternative to do is you can get an epoxy that's a gel, but just make sure it's a clear gel, because a lot of the gels are colored. It's like off-white or gray. The gels are like thick, so it won't have that goopiness. So you can start to see it's starting to thicken up a little bit. See how it's dripping off my knife? You don't want it to be dripping too much. So I'm gonna get it. It's a little saggy. I'm gonna wait a little bit, and then it should start firming up before it starts hardening. So okay, so I'm gonna test it. Still dripping, yeah. Little bit slower, it's kind of holding it. So let's try and put a little bit on. We're gonna get our jaw. Okay, and we're just going to right across that seam. And you can see how I got that epoxy on there. Grab a little bit more epoxy. Check how it's dripping. Not too bad, it's a little thicker. I'm gonna wait a little bit before I put a little bit more. And this is just to keep it so after it ends up drying, you don't have all these sags underneath. That's why you don't want it too runny when you first put it on. Okay, so it's a little bit thicker. So, and feel free to, you can be liberal with it. It's not, unless you really want this thing really clean looking, it's fine, because it's actually holding your jaw together. It's not too bad, if you're a little liberal with it. Okay, that's pretty good. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure it's nice and solid, it doesn't move. Okay. You can see the epoxy. See, it's starting to drip down there in the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my knife and I'm just going to lift that up. Take away that drip. Just like that. And it should actually start setting pretty soon. It should be hardening. You might have to catch that section again. See, it's dripping. So if you can find the epoxy with the gel in it, the gel version, it doesn't drip as much, it's not as saggy. Okay, that should be good. Okay, well this is setting. I'm going to go ahead and do the bottom. So I got 2 plates. I'm just going to go ahead and make some room over here where I mix the epoxy. We're going to get more clay. You can see how with the clay it's so much easier to set this up. If you didn't have the clay, you would have to lean it against something or prop it up against something, or with the clay you can poke it in there, firm it up, and it keeps it suspended and perfect, and there's no problems at all. And this clay is cheap. The other good thing about it is with whatever leftovers you got in the bag, you can make stuff out of it with your kids and stuff. You can make little projects, whatever, and it bakes in the oven. You bake it in the oven, you can paint it and everything, and make pencil holders, or if you have enough clay you can even make a cup. Maybe make something for fishing, something to hold like your bait knife, or something to go on your bucket, who knows. You can make a lure, so Okay, we got our clay set up. Now we're gonna do the bottom. Okay, same thing. We're just gonna position it. What I like to do is just get your jaw and sort of just eyeball it, put it up to where you think it's gonna match up. So I'm looking right about there. It's hard to see. Let me try to show you. See, you can see how you want it to match up, yeah? Okay, so let's do this. We're gonna poke it in the clay. I might need a little bit more clay on this because this part is wider. So we'll grab more clay. There we go. And when you're lining this up, it should be relatively straight to each other. It shouldn't be crooked or anything. You know, so the two joints should be nice and straight. You can kind of press some of the clay up against the edge of the jaw to give it additional support. Because you don't want it to be moving. Okay, and I've got it all set up. It's ready to put some epoxy. So same thing. We're going to take the epoxy. And this epoxy is about $4 or $5 at any local hardware store, so it's readily available. So I have several utensils to use, but for this one, this knife is still good. We're gonna mix. Same procedure. We're gonna mix that thing up. Just mix it good. Make sure you mix both parts of the epoxy. You don't want it to be or it doesn't set and it's just, you know, wet, or it takes a long time to set. This is a quick setting epoxy, and that's what you want. This is 5 minutes. You don't want to be, you know, leaving this thing overnight or anything like that. For the most part, it doesn't have to be rock solid from when you first do it, because you can always come back later to get it all set up. You know, what this really is you're just trying to get it together. Once it's together, then you can come back and put more, or if you need to, strengthen it. Okay, so there's our bottom jaw right there. And now we're going to do our little test. We're going to let it drip. See, that's kind of runny. Still kind of runny. So we're going to wait a little bit more, let it start to kind of firm up, do its chemical process. It'll start hardening. You can see this one is pretty hard. It's a little tacky, but it's pretty solid. And you can see our jaw, how the jaw is nice and epoxy now. Yeah. Okay, let's check. Okay, see that? It's not running too much. That's what we want. So we're just going to go ahead and kind of drizzle it or drip it over, just like that. After this is together, and you can flip it back over and then do the backside if you want that additional strength. But for now, we just need to keep it intact so it doesn't fall apart when we're doing it together. But later on, you can flip it over and you can do the backside for just additional support, so you don't have to worry about this thing coming apart. Yeah. Here we go. And that should be it, because there's not too much area here. I'm going to try and pick up that extra run. Okay. You can see it. You can see the epoxy there. There's a little bit of a drip forming on the bottom, so I'm just going to pick that up with the knife. Just like that. There we go. And if you want, you can even kind of go under it like this. And you can catch a little bit of the underneath just to help kind of solidify it as a whole. And you want a nice coating. Yeah. I'm gonna let this set, and then by the time this is done and this is done, we're gonna be able to put the two together, and you should have a finished Ulua Jaw in less than 15 minutes. So let me test this one out. We're gonna see if it's tacky or. So this one feels pretty good. Still be careful with it because the epoxy is not rock solid, but you can see how it's all together. A little bit of the epoxy went underneath, so this one is still wet. So while I'm at it, I'm gonna try and, oh, maybe it's hard. I'm gonna try and see if I can get a little bit over here, if it'll go. And it's not, it's sort of drying already. See how it's stretching? So we're just gonna go ahead and pull that off. It's not gonna go. Okay, so we got the top part of our jaw. This is, once again, I think it's from a 14-pound umilu. This was caught in the Big Island late last year when I went up. Okay, so we got that first half. This one should be finishing soon. While I'm waiting for that one to finish, I'm gonna go ahead and set up this other plate with this clay for the final. So I'm gonna need a little bit more clay for both sides of the jaw. So I'm gonna grab more clay. All you're doing is just making a bed. You're making a bed of clay. Okay. And I'm going to show you how to do the two pieces of the jaw together. We're just waiting for this other one to dry. This part is easy. This is the last part, and it's relatively easy. I'm just going to kind of poke it in. Let's see if this one's done. Once again, you just kind of do a finger test. It's kind of tacky. I think it would be good enough to hold together, which it is. There you go. That's our bottom half. You can see the epoxy. A little bit went on the other side, which is good because, like I said, once again, you want it to be reinforced. Okay, test to see how it lines up. This one's not bad. And you can, how you make your jaw, you can have it more angled front, or you can have it more open if you want it to look bigger. So it all depends on how you want to make it. You can even have it as closed if you want. Okay. Let's see if, oh, see, this one started to flex. It's not quite dry yet. Just started to flex. A little too early. Okay. And what you're gonna do is, well, let's let this sit for a little bit because it's still not quite there. What you're gonna do is, for the final, you have to flip it upside down. Let's see, is this one dry? Yeah, this one's good. And you're gonna kind of poke it in the clay like that, and then we're going to put some clay behind it. Okay, maybe it's dry now. This one's tricky because you don't have a lot of surface area to kind of goop it on top. Okay, so we're going to do the first jaw first. So take some of this clay, make sort of like a little lump that you can kind of rest it against, and press the clay. I don't know if you can see this, but okay, so we're going to get that clay, put it up against the front of it like this. You make like a little support for it to rest on, right? Then you're going to get another piece and then put it up on the inside. So you sort of sandwich it between the two, just like that. Okay, now we're going to get this piece, right? And we're going to put this piece. Okay, so this one, you're going to dig the teeth in on this one and kind of push it down. And that's how I've got it. You can see how the jaw, it's facing down and it's holding itself, yeah? So you want it to where the pieces are touching. The two corners of the jaw are touching. Yeah. And so for this, same thing, we're going to take some clay, we're going to sandwich it on the inside. Keep it secure while the epoxy sets. Okay, and then just kind of adjust as you need it. Just as long as the corners are touching each other. That's what you want, and that's where we're going to put the epoxy. Okay, so we got our jaw all set up. Now we're going to mix the epoxy to do the remainder. Okay. Cut this. This knife has kind of had its days already, so I'm just going to go ahead and just, because it's, you can see all the stuck epoxy. So I got an extra knife, so it's good to have a few extras. And we're just going to mix it. Once again, you want it kind of thicker on the goopy side. That way, when you put it on those corners, it'll hold. You may actually have to do it 2 or 3 times after it dries to ensure that it's holding. Okay, we've got our jaw. I'm going to let this sit for a little bit. That way, you know, the gel, the epoxy starts to thicken, because we don't want it real runny. Yeah. Okay. So let's check. You can see it's still drippy. There it goes. So a little bit longer, and then we're going to be putting it on the corners. You basically just gotta gob it on there. Okay, let's just. I'm gonna make sure that thing has contact. There we go. Let's get rid of this knife. Alright, take our epoxy and just kind of drip it on there very lightly. You don't want to just, and I'm letting it kind of sag down. And you're going to do that on the other side. Drip it on there, make sure it has both little corners of the jaw. And it's going to drip on this one, and there's nothing you can do about it, and it's fine, just as long as it doesn't dry that way. Because there's not a whole lot for it to grab onto. It's, you know, this tiny little points here, and it doesn't have a lot of area for grab. So it's starting to thicken, which is good. That means I can now start putting more. And you gotta act fast, because once this stuff starts thickening, that's it. It's gonna get like real sticky. And I'm just kind of trying to get a good area here covered while it's still workable. Get both sides now, yeah? And then catch the drip here underneath. And try and put a little bit more on the top while it hardens. There's another drip over here. We're going to catch that. And if you want, I'm going to put a little bit on this side right here. That's all you're doing. You're just, as this thing is drying in a few minutes, you're picking up the drip from the bottom and just kind of putting it back on the top. And in another minute or so, it'll be done. Yeah, there we go. Pretty easy. Be careful that this thing doesn't move, because then it's going to set up pretty fast. Actually, it's like it's setting up already. Okay, so you can see how it's coming along. Okay. So it's starting to turn sort of a milky color, and that tells me it's hardening. Okay. And that's how you're going to do your jaw. So I'm going to give this a few minutes. I'm just going to let this harden up, because I don't want to pull this thing off of the clay and then it falls apart and I got to do the whole thing over again. So just let this sit for a good 5-10 minutes. So these corners are going to be the weakest points on this whole thing. Once it's all done and it's actually intact and whole, then you don't need the clay anymore. You can just put it down on a regular paper plate as is, and then you can go with the epoxy if you want to do the back sides of the jaw, or you want to put more on the corner to reinforce it. You can go ahead and do that, but this is enough to just go ahead and display it and have it up, and you know, you should be good to go. So we're going to give it a few minutes. We're going to let it dry and see how it comes out. Okay, so it's been about 5 minutes. I got the jaw complete. It's all mounted, and you're good to go. So you can see this one's a little bit wider open how I have it set, but there's different styles and positions and stuff. You can make it a little bit more closed, like this one. It's a little bit more closed versus this other one where it's a little bit more open. It's up to you. That's the beauty of it. But that's how you do it. You got your seam on the top, the epoxy here on the bottom, you got the joints we epoxied. The clay is the biggest thing that you can do to do this efficiently and you know, easily. You know, you do it without the clay, then it gets to be kind of a pain in the butt, I'll be honest, because then you have to try and prop it up on things, and it's a headache. So that's it. You know, I hope you guys catch some big uluas and land some uluas. You can kind of see these ones, but that's our Ulua Jaw in a nutshell. After this, if you want to finish it off, you can go ahead and I've got 2 different types right here. So this kind of, I don't know, it's hard to see, but it's a little bit glossy on the actual bone itself. You can kind of see that glossiness. I went over it with a clear, like a crystal clear spray-on acrylic varnish. They usually make it for woods, and it's to protect it. Usually you put it on like wood or any of those sorts of things to water seal the wood or the furniture and stuff. So same thing here. I spray this varnish on top, and it protects the bone, and it gives it like a nice finish. makes it a little smoother versus just raw bone. But you can kind of see the with the light, that glossiness. There's also another varnish. It's kind of like it's got a color to it. So if you want to add a little bit of color to your jaw, like this one's got a little bit of a almost like a stain in the varnish. You can go ahead and apply this, and they make them in either brush on type or it's spray. So let's see if you can see the difference here. So you can see how one is a lot whiter than the other, and the other is a little bit more kind of tan color. So it all depends on how you want your jaws to look. There we go. That's the two jaws together. Yeah. So, and you can see the epoxy I did on these other ones. And that's it. That's how you do your Ulua jaws. And just let your, this is our jaw we did today. Just let it set overnight. And then, like I said, you can go back after and put a little bit additional reinforcement and spray a varnish on to protect it. And from there, you can mount it in a shadow box or just have it on display at your office or your home. You can prop it up just like this. The Uluas have this nice plate on the bottom of their jaw where it'll rest nicely if you've done it right. Yeah. Or you can put a little plaque and whatnot. So that's Ulua Jaws 101. That's how you mount your jaw. So in case anybody had any questions or you wanted to know how to do that, this is how you do it. This is the easiest way that I've found to do it. There may be other ways that people use, but this is pretty much how I do it. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Aloha.